Hello, everyone. Oh, wow, I just jumped into the view that way. All right, there we go. Hey, everyone, what's up? This is the Jankyard with your host, The Treatment, and the one and only Killer Cactus. How you doing, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm great. I just told you that my wife, Miss Treatment, is suffering from pneumonia. Um, and so it's been a rough week or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise, no complaints. Got to spend a bunch of days with the kids. I had a lot of time off, so I was very fortunate to, be able to do that. And she's starting to get on the mend. And we got ashes, so it's always good. Life is good.
I do. Yeah.
And
I'm playing a
today,
little more Ashes lately than I've been playing previously, so I'm
yeah, then
happy
your
about
Mickey
that.
Mouse
Still,
cards.
still Mickey Mouse cards, but more Ashes than maybe more Ashes than Mickey Mouse cards lately. Although we have set championships this weekend, so
Ooh.
I have to start practicing Mickey Mouse cards now too.
I I was so excited for this set, and then I think I've played a total of 3 games in the last couple weeks. Um, I just, yeah, I just been busy, and all of a sudden it's like, oh shoot, I don't even have a deck for the team tournament. I didn't. I think I sort of called it in on the last of the one and dones. But yeah, like between streaming at night and then everything else, it's been tricky. So
Yeah.
I got to
Oh, you
build.
had a pretty good excuse.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing the stuff with Ninja on the weekend too, and everything else. So it's been a lot of streaming.
Yeah. Hmm.
But today we're gonna talk about, or hopefully cover some of the one and done decks, because there are a lot. There were 26 players, 5 weeks at a minimum, so 130 decks. Just to consider, not
Yeah,
to
we're gonna go
mention the
over
top
every
cuts.
deck and every card.
Yeah,
That's
welcome to the
not what
next
we're gonna do.
8 hour stream.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Um, so I did just for fun. I went through all the week one decks. I was just trying to see if I could find any ones that like piqued my interest, and then I started noticing a slightly interesting pattern, which was which conjuration was the most popular. So I did a little tally.
Conjuration. Okay.
Yeah. So conjuration, what do you think is the most popular conjuration week one? Oops.
Orchid Dove.
Why that was in your deck, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, no.
was
Uh, I'll I'll give you a hint. It's time. It's a time unit.
Wishing Wing.
Ooh, very close. So every Dweller was the most popular.
Ruin Dweller. Okay.
Yeah. I think there were 6 copies of that, and then I think I counted 5 shimmies, which is sort of expected. But then Turtle, Snapper, Crab, Wishing Wing, and Hopper all came in at 4 copies each.
Wow, everybody played time week one, huh?
Everybody. There were. It
That's
was like either you played time or you played a burn list, or you were Killer Cactus playing a mill list. But other than that, almost everyone played time. It was
uh,
very
I
interesting.
played Ash Spirit.
Yeah, you did Turbo Mill.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so that's an interesting observation though, but I think it makes sense because time is probably the weakest color right now. I mean, just by virtue of it being one of the only two that hasn't had a its Red Rains expansion yet. And
Yeah.
um Title Crab was kind of a linchpin of a lot of the time-based decks, and that card is just really bad into Paladin.
Well,
So
that's what kind of
it's
surprised me. That's part of the mind games, which we can talk about. Is you know, up until this tournament, Paladin's just been everywhere. It's just too good not
yeah.
to include it. Ninja and I we had a stream about how to try and counter it, and by the end of it, after the cast, I was just like, you can't, like, it's almost like you can't come out ahead. It's so good. So I was surprised to
Yeah.
see all these really low to the ground, especially Crab, which costs three, playing into what could have been a Paladin week one.
Yeah, and but that's the like you said, it's the mind games of it, right? Like that's probably why week one might be one of the most interesting weeks of this because people are likely trying to save cards
Hmm.
for later rounds. So probably did have the lowest chance of Paladin, right, or sitting down across from Paladin in week one. So Tidal Crab might have been a pretty good shout. Um, but it's what's your mindset, right? Is your mindset I'm confident that I can win with underplayed stuff and I'm going to save my good stuff for later, or do I want to win now so that I can try and guarantee a spot in the top cut and then I can slow down? Um, I'm not really sure what most people went with, but that probably makes week one pretty interesting to take a peek at.
I can tell you for certain that Alfred reserved every good card until the last week when we met up, and he was running, I think, a Brian deck that had Silver Paladin, three copies of Paladin, three copies of Scald, three Shepherd of Lost Souls, and then Lioness, Sally, and Lightbringer. And he would just toss. Oh, even Leviathan was in there. He would just toss all these cards and then pull them right back, and I couldn't do anything. It was ridiculous. I did not expect all of, and Fork Lightning, of course. It was just like every
Yeah.
good card in the last week. But let me pull
so
this
week
up.
one, week one, he played a Venom Strike Maoni. It looks like I was wondering what he played. Started
Yeah,
with no, he had Emperor Lion instead of Silver Snake to pull out Law of Fear.
yeah.
Um,
Very
and
overloaded Red King esque type of board, spell
yeah,
board.
six different ready spells.
Four of which are utilities. Yeah. Oh wait, did I lose you? Your audio? Yeah, I think I did. Uh, 1 second. I don't think I did anything different. Try again.
Are you here now?
Yeah.
You look frozen on my screen. I don't know,
Oh,
but
it could just be that yeah, my computer is slowly dying under the pressure of opening all these tabs. Yeah, this is a these are the types of decks I think scare me because I don't know how you beat a lot of different, like it's like a narrow range of like I could see me doing well here, and then everything else I'm like I just don't see how I can come out on top.
against a Venom Strike deck or against the week 5 deck?
No, the Venom Strike deck, like just me playing that type of deck. It's it's like a
Oh,
lot of Red King
okay, yeah.
decks where six ready spells, and then I'm looking into how to beat like Swarm. How do you beat Burn? And I'm just like, man, this too many choices for the first five.
Yeah, I don't do well with those types of decks either typically. The the exception being the ally heavy Odette deck that I played at Gen Con and also in round 4 of this and in the grand final, although I
Yep.
don't count that because I just can talk about that game. Um but uh that deck has a lot of different opens, but they're allies, not spellboard, and managing the spellboard is a lot trickier
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
opinion than managing the battlefield is.
Well, okay, so before we jump into some of the deck lists, definitely we'll cover like Underrug, like some of the top I guess 4 or 6 players. Those are easy to see what they did because we know it led to success. um what was your approach going into this tournament? Like, it was the first of its kind, and it was a very novel limited format. So how did you approach it?
So I mean I was winging it to an extent, but I did have like a plan at the beginning. So I started by building 5 different decks. But as I was doing that, I was asking myself, are there that I know are competitive but don't share like common cards,
Hmm.
right? So that was the question I asked myself at the beginning because I wanted to know how many different types of decks can I build that don't need like that are good on their own. I don't need, that I don't have to have old salt in every one of these decks, right? And I landed on that was how I landed on Turbo Mill first. Right? That was
Right.
the easy choice for me because I knew I didn't have a lot of other decks in my repertoire that were going to be playing Ash Spirit and Orchid Dove, um, and stuff like that. So I did I did modify that very slightly to I usually run a Beast Tamer in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that out because I figured one of the archetypes I would build would be like a heavy charm type deck because um and also a heavy illusion deck. Those two colors I feel like are the best at um playing like a mono type build or close to that.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'm probably gonna play like a mono illusion type deck. So I built that hope that I think I played in round two. I originally had like a full mono charm Saria built, or maybe a 9 charm, one something else Saria deck that I was gonna play originally. Um, and really, as I was building those, I kind of started thinking like, okay, I'm making all these decks that I think are pretty good, and I haven't really touched any of the cards that I played in my Gen Con Odette. So I just built that or a very close version of that and said, I'm gonna play this at some point too. Um, and I think the fifth deck I had was like a Noah, like a reaction heavy time illusion type Noah deck that I never ended up using.
Okay.
Um, and and then after I did all that, and then realized I hadn't used any burn cards. Like none of those. It was like
Across
mill
all five
and
decks.
yeah, it was like mill fatigue.
Wow.
Three of my decks were fatigue decks, right? Like I had a turbo mill, I had a mono charm deck, and I had an illusion spin down deck, and then I had a control Odette. So and then I built the reaction Noah, and that was like time illusion and sympathy, and didn't use any of the burn cards.
Mm-hmm.
So I just grabbed a bunch of burn cards and threw them into a Jessa, and all of a sudden had 6 decks. And I kind of tweaked them as I went, and then I didn't plan out what order I was going to play them in. I kind of saved that for, who I was playing against, with the caveat being I wanted to play the Turbo Mill in round one. Um, Regardless of who I was playing, I happened to play against Kyle, but I wanted to play that in round one because I liked its chances against bad cards
Mm.
more than I
Interesting.
did against like good cards. Like if I was running like against the top tier control type stuff, that's where I think that deck can falter
So
and
you
just kind of get
expected people to
overrun.
play the top tier later on then?
Yeah, and that's kind of that was the approach I took. I saved that Odette for later and said, if I want to win the tournament, and I need to you're going to need to win some games with bad cards or for lack of a better word, I don't think the cards I was playing were bad, just like with maybe not the top tier of card.
Hmm.
And I figured if everybody else thought that way, then I'd want to play my weaker stuff early, but it was, still stuff I was confident playing, right? Like that Turbo Mill I've got a million games with.
Yeah.
I know that deck really well. The Hope Illusion deck, I don't have a ton of games in with like that Final Destination type deck. Who did I play? I don't remember who I played against that round.
The Final Destination being version of your version
Just
of
a,
Lark's mono illusion.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it just, for lack of a better word, 10 illusion dice with reimagine, right? Is
Yeah.
kind of what I think of when I say that. Um, I cannot remember who I played in round two.
Yeah, I don't have the matchups with me, but I can flip
I don't
over
either.
to the decks when we're ready
I
to
mean,
talk about them. Otherwise, it's just very
yeah.
bright.
And
uh,
I think that one was like I was the least confident in it of the rest of them, so I played that round two. And I know round three I was against Fred, and I'm not confident against him, right? Like I feel like I always lose to him. So I wanted to play something that was like crutchy, right? That I could like bail out on, or that was easy for me to play. So I that's why I ran the Jessa Burn in that matchup, because I felt like it was the biggest like cop out type deck where I could make mistakes and still like be okay
what
potentially.
what was the one game you dropped?
I lost round five against Under Rug Swept when I played a complete garbage Rhino deck.
Oh, okay. You played the Rhino.
So
Okay, yeah.
so I played. I went into round four because I was 3-0. So in round four, I was like, all right, if I win in round four, I'm automatically in top eight. Like this is a win and in game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was against. Oh man, who was I against? Brian? Or I don't remember.
This is a very
It might have been
funny
Brian.
Rhino deck. I pulled it up for people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. It was sorry, but I played. I've just like put all my money on round four trying to win and get in, which I did, and then round five didn't matter, so I just built a completely new deck using as like I wanted to make something that was cohesive. I could at least justify being a real deck, but I just tried to use all like the cards I knew I didn't care about using in the top cut.
Right. And so Underrug
Um,
played
and
Jessa against that Rhino
yeah, he
deck.
played like a real deck, and he feared my Rhino in the first round, and I didn't know what to do.
Ugh.
Um, although he was playing Blood Puppets, like his deck was like mainly Blood Puppets, and I had Canyon Shelter. So if I was playing better, like I think I just kind of went in. I knew this was round was like a meme, and I didn't care, so I just wanted to like throw rhinos at stuff.
Yeah.
And there was part of me that was like, well, maybe he'll first five of playtime because he's probably a Blood Puppet deck. He first five fear, but I think I probably like could have just played Canyon Shelter and started storing Blood Puppets under there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe like been in pretty good shape after a while and just forgot about the Rhino until later. But I didn't think that much through.
I forget who did
I,
that. It was probably Shadow, but he did that one time I was playing a puppet deck and he sucked up all five of them. And then I was like, "Okay, now what do I do?" All right.
like I ran some test games with this Rhino deck before I played it. It did like surprisingly well in
I
just
could
like some
see it
casual Aztec-y games.
for sure. I closed it. I can pull it up again. Yeah, I mean it's got the surprise factor, which I think is part of this tournament as well.
Yeah.
And because the answers are not as widespread across every match, there's a
Hmm.
chance that your opponent has nothing to answer that type of threat. Um,
Right.
but it's interesting that your last week was on a rainbow deck, basically. Well, yeah, I guess you're missing ceremonial, but
Yeah. I
very
mean,
cool.
I threw a big pile of cards together that I knew I wouldn't play in Top Cut. I will say that I used cover in one of my test games to 6 damage.
I
It was
don't.
like they did like a
It's like
somebody did
use your
like a like
guard, right?
massive, yeah, it was like they massive growth something
Mm.
and then swung at the Rhino to try and kill it, and I guarded and played cover and absorbed the 6 damage. I celebrated.
That's
It
that's
was the
probably the best it's ever been.
Yeah, I said this is the best that cover has been in the history of Ashes. No one's ever done this before.
Yeah. It's
So that was
it's
fun.
it's interesting that, like, I mean, obviously that makes sense. You were successful getting to the finals, whereas I did very poorly, and I did very little preparation. Most of mine was winging it, and picking from either decks I had or ideas I came up with like the night before, the day of, and just put the deck together before the match. I think three of the decks I just put together, and the first deck I played was my Gen Con list with one modification. Um, my second week list, I wanted to play a mono list because Divine was good, and I was like, I'm not going to splash Divine across all these things. And I also thought mono is easier to then like give yourself other cards for different decks. Like if you know just there's the synergy internally, and then it's like, okay, now I've used these up, and I can go on. I wasn't even tracking what I was using, so uh, not in any
Yeah.
specific way. So it was easier to do it this way too. But I think I just got beat out by Brian. It was a fun mono Herald list. Um, and then week 3, was that the week I played? So week 1 was Burn. Oh yeah, I don't remember who I faced, but I played a Koji Swarm deck, and this was just one I had, with Mirror Spirits and Creepers, and Resonance. And then I think maybe it was against Fritz. Uh, oh yeah, it was because he played something. He played Mill, which was funny. That it's normally something I would play, and then I played Swarm, which is typically his preferred style.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then a Fiona that I just thought was an interesting deck that had possibilities, and I never play Fiona. And the match was going well. This was against Underrug Swept until he played Exhortation on a Beast Tamer and Sonic, swung, crescendoed my Turtle Guard, and hit me for 10, which on Fiona is
Thanks.
not great.
No.
And and then I almost clawed back, and I think he was able to finish me off with burn or one more swing. But it was just like, oh, I did not see the exhortation coming. That was full
Yeah.
surprise. And then my last week against Fred, I put an Echo deck together. I think 2 minutes before we were supposed to play. We got our time zones messed up, and he's like, "Oh, so we're supposed to play now?" I was like, "No, you said tomorrow." And he's like, "Oh, okay, no worries." And I'm like, "Ah, whatever. Give me 2 minutes." So I put a deck together. It was an Echo deck, and I didn't put any Divine or Sympathy in it, so I couldn't even play Chaos Gravity.
Oh, geez.
And
Yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you don't have the dice for it." And all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, great." And so it went downhill. Hey, Fred, how's it going? He's in the chat. You're the only one listening to us right now, so hopefully we can keep you entertained. But yeah, so I did not do well. I went 2-3, but I just, like I said, I've been playing very loosey goosey with my games and my time. Um, so let's see what other people did.
I was looking at Under Rugs lists while
Yeah,
we were going through yours just now,
I mean
and
he's the winner, right?
um,
So it's obviously what
yeah,
he did
he's
won, or was a good
right. Yeah,
approach.
he's got some interesting stuff. A couple things that I didn't do, um, that I thought about doing, right? That I didn't do that he did. Specifically like Tristan in round one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think Tristan was a good shell to play, specifically like the fish deck,
Yeah, Fishton
because
is
that
solid.
yeah, that's a deck that can beat stuff and doesn't really need a ton of staple type cards. Tsunami Shot and Rile the Meek kind of covers your removal, and then you don't need to run a lot of other control type stuff. And I mean, this is like a modified Tristan starter deck. I mean, like look at this deck.
Yeah,
There's a lot of cards that come in the starter deck, right? The spell board's the same. The You got Tsunami Shot, Title Shift, Leviathan, Standstill, Darkwater Hunter. I mean, these are all Tristan cards.
yeah.
um, so he's just changed out a few cards, but it's solid.
I like that. What's
Um,
interesting is the crab, to put the tokens on the Tetra to keep them around, or to put them on the Leviathan. And then he's
mhm.
got the Scalds to toss the Leviathan.
Yeah, to throw the Leviathans, right?
Shared Sorrow to bring cards back, which is interesting in its
Or
own right.
or do Leviathan stuff as well.
Yep. And Crab even
Hand in
works with
hand in one to
Standard
discard.
Bearer, right? Chuck it on
Mhm.
Standard Bearer and
Yep.
makes your swarm even more potent. Which is why the only thing I'm actually surprised with is that this deck doesn't have Flash Strike, given the number of
Yeah.
tokens in here.
That yeah, that and Wave Crash are the cards that I feel like are missing.
Yeah, but Title
Uh,
Shift is a spicy pick as well, which is cool.
mhm.
So very solid deck. I'll go through the
Yeah.
just the top 6 players first week decks. So we don't
Yeah.
have to talk too much about yours because you mentioned that you went
Yeah,
Turbo Mill,
mine's mine's fairly known at this point.
and then Ninja
He
classical.
started with Astria, so he came out swinging.
He came out swinging. Uh,
Um,
Burn list, which is basically what you might expect. Um,
yeah, only one judgment, and so here's, I mean, that's interesting. There's only one judgment, but
mhm.
I guess if he's trying to end the game fast, it's not a big deal. But here, something else that's a thought to talk about is like I look at the 1x Nature's Wrath in here, right?
Mhm.
And it was a risk, especially early in the event, to play, one copy of a card in your deck. It
Yeah,
feels like a waste, right? Because you're not even playing 3x. It's like you're just playing one, and then that inhibits your ability to play that card the rest of the entire event. So
yeah. I that was the only thing I really was sort of careful about, or where I would make modifications. Is like, do I need a 1x here, or is this better if I just have 2 or 3 copies in another deck,
yeah, I
like
did
Ice
think about
Trap
that.
or Wrath?
Right. Like there were cards where I did that and just included one of that aren't spellboard cards, but I did think about that, right? And had to say like, all right, am I certain that I do not need this card anywhere else?
Hmm.
Or can I take this out and just replace it with something else so that I have it for later?
Uh,
So that's interesting here, especially when you could have played a second judgment instead of that wrath. It's
yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting choice, and he didn't even go with 2 Mark of the Goddess, so it's just the
right.
2 uniques, which is an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Um, but it worked. I think it worked. I believe. I didn't look at the individual
I'm not
pairings.
sure if he didn't win this round or whatever, but yeah, I mean I do like Mark of the Goddess in a burn deck.
Yeah, for sure.
So makes
Apple
sense.
Sith. He also went with a burn deck, but in Jessa. And this one's interesting
Mhm.
because he actually played 3 copies of Bone Crow,
Yeah,
which
the three bone crow. That's interesting.
very
I guess if you're
interesting.
trying to draw into it, maybe
Yeah,
if you don't necessarily want to open it.
I mean, it's interesting because you can, if you're going to choke or no, not stroke, bloodchains your own unit, or frostbite one of theirs, or swing out, then you know you're probably going to trigger the bone crows. But I just find with like 3 of them, on 4 feet of battlefields, it's just I don't know. That's a very tight fit, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like you just can't first five it. Like you
Yeah.
you have to be wanting to draw into this card. Um,
Abby's got like we should probably cover most of her decks because she's a very interesting builder, and this
I'm sure
is
these are interesting.
almost, well, I can't say it's Final Destination because there's no reimagine, but it's almost a mono illusion. And she's running 3 Dark Presence, a body inversion, and then Shadow Hound, which is just
Yeah.
so cool. And then she's got more spin down, so Dreamlock, Hollow, and interesting. We talked about Ninja doing the 1 Nature's Wrath. She only splashed 1 nature die, but it's only for Nature's Wrath, and I think that's
Yeah.
partially because if someone plays the clog game against you, um, then your only self clear is Nature's Wrath. The Hollows,
And
the Ancestrals.
yeah, yeah, you always want to get those ancestor spirits off of Rimia's spell board so that you can
Mm.
replay Ancestral Army for full value,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a good way to do that. I
So
like the Spectral Assassin to bounce the army back.
yeah, that's a fun
That's cool.
synergy.
Um, I've been playing. I played a Rimia, as a matter of fact, just in the team tournament in round one.
Oh yeah, new Ramia. Oh,
Backflip to bounce back the Ancestral Army, which I love. Um, but Spectral Assassin is also cool, especially in a pre-backflip world.
mm-hmm.
To get the army back, that's fun.
Let me close some of these tabs so my computer doesn't chugs. And then we've got Waves, who was also one of the top cut. He went with a Squall
Like
Stallion
Lulu,
deck because he loves Squall Stallion. But this is
yeah.
perhaps a more traditional, not traditional. This is more like a standard deck that I could see you running anytime. Like it's like he just picked a solid deck. Um, and on top of it, it's got Realm Walker, which
Mhm.
is
That's a pretty interesting bypass deck. I mean, you've
a
got
good bypass. Yeah.
Realm Walker. Yeah, you have a Stasis in here, which is an underrated bypass card. You have Accelerate to do like the cool, multiple combos with either Stasis, or Wave Crash to clear something, into another side action. I mean,
There's
you've got
there's a lot of tempo,
Standstill. Yeah,
right? There's Darkwater Hunter, like all these off main
yeah.
action
Time
plays.
Hopper. Yeah.
Stamina burst to get that top round swing, if you can
hmm
set it up.
Even
It's
a, even a reflections in the water, the
yeah,
sneaky reflections in the water on the turtle guard, right? That's, I'm assuming, what this is for. To
potentially, or because
swing your
as
turtle guard
we've
in.
discussed, it answers everything.
It does answer everything. That's true.
It does answer everything.
Yeah, duelist, another tempo card. Yeah, there's a lot of tempo in here.
It's really cool. And then finally, just because I went down like I think the top six or something like that, the Bills deck, which was a swarmy Koji type of thing. Again, Tidal Crab,
Wolk,
Hopper,
Wolk
and Wishing
gang.
Wing. Wolfgang, yeah. So
Mhm.
there's three wolves and just again a lot of solid stuff like two Crypt Guardians, two Master Vampires, the standard
Three
bearer,
Sleeping Widows.
and three widows. Yeah,
That
very
card. That card
aggressive.
does not see enough play. Sleeping Widows is underplayed right now.
Yes,
Um, Crypt Guardian as well. That's another card that just is really good and is never, like, no one plays that card. Why not? It's freaking good.
I. Funny enough, I took it out of my week one deck. It's in my Gen Con deck, but I took it out because I was planning on using it elsewhere because it is so good. I was like, this shouldn't be a 1x. I should use it 2 or 3 in something else, which I don't think I did. But yeah, it's underplayed for sure. So those are, I mean, there's like a mix, right? We saw some swarm, we saw burn, aggro. I know that Redentor played Jericho because he was in my matchup. That was, again some very fast stuff. But it didn't seem like any week one decks were holding their punches at all.
It
So
depends on how you define that, right? Like, I think playing the time cards kind of is pulling your punches. I
I
mean,
think it,
I think time
yeah,
is pretty weak right now, or at least it's seen as weak. It still can do powerful things. It's just not quite as powerful into the current meta. So I think time was a solid week one play for that reason. Like, we didn't see any paladins in any of those decks, right? Like, nobody played paladin in round one of those 7 decks we just looked at or whatever.
yeah, and even when I went down, actually, I do have to call out at least one person. No, maybe two. I gotta call out Kyle and Dell because when I open their deck links, the deck has been deleted. So shame
Yeah.
on you guys.
I think Kyle played me in round one, so I think he played a Rin.
Yeah, but
I
we'll
could be
never
wrong
know
about
for
that. I
sure
won't.
because he deleted the
No,
deck.
we will not. I don't remember. Well, we do know because we streamed it on the Jankyard.
Oh, that's right. You guys
So
played live
yeah, we did.
in
So
person,
that game exists. Yeah, that game exists somewhere.
real paper. I actually
Um,
just put it in a playlist, so it's on one of
yeah.
the game replay playlist. All right. So then, quickly looking at what we had in week 2. So under rug, he played a, I guess, more typical Mayoni snake deck. I mean,
Yeah.
most snake decks
This
are
was the other thing
typical.
I wanted to. Yeah, this was the other thing I wanted to talk about because I had built a Mayoni because Snake is another one of those archetype decks,
Yeah.
right? Where you can build a whole deck around Snake. You don't really need a ton of other super staple cards. I mean, you're going to play Snake, Explosive Growth, Golden Veil,
Mm-hmm.
and right, and then other than that, it's like all right, mix and match your control. Um, I play tested Mayoni for the top cut against Kyle at one of our Mickey Mouse card live events, and he just beat me up and reminded me that I don't know how to play Mayoni, so I scrapped it. But I do think that this was a good call for this tournament because it's pretty easy to put a Mayoni deck together and not limit your other builds. Again, a lot of one X copies here, like Essence Druid, Polarity Mage. Those are cards that could have went to other decks.
Yeah.
Um, that he took away here, but I mean they do their job. Um, Essence Druid is kind of necessary for Mayoni if you run into a Noah and you're in a lot of trouble round one, but Druid kind of solves that.
I I don't think the one ofs, the Polarity Mage or Jungle Forger, really losses to anything else. It's really only whether you would want to play some other like mill Cobra decks tend to play Essence Druid or maybe I don't know a Creeper or Mirror Spirit deck.
Yeah.
Fred in the chat, he typing up a storm. He didn't like what you had to say. He he said that he played Cole week 1 to avoid the ping heavy matchups because he thought those would appear later on. But he disagrees strongly that a strong snake deck is reliant on staple removal cards and that you generally want a strong knight with it, which is interesting. Like he's got the Ruin Dweller. This is all snakes, right? I guess the theme is
Yeah.
Ruin Dweller instinct. There's no Hammer Knight. There's no knight. Not even a Frostfang is another good. Um, what's it called? Snake attack. Command strike. Target.
Target.
This is how often I play Mayoni. Can't even remember the name. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and like Fred's right. I mean, it is nice to have like part of the power of the snake deck, right? Is being able to overload the stats in round one. Like you get a snake gives you a 4 life body for 2 dice.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to play that alongside another knight, and Gilder is a lot to deal with in round one. I get that's why you want it. I'm just saying, like, it can it can be a big part of the deck on its own and kind of allow you to play with some of the other card slots, which it looks like he's done here, right? I mean, we're seeing really no allies other than one, 3 copies of one each, right? Of allies. And Survival of the Fittest is a good card here that you're probably not going to need elsewhere. I think
Yeah.
it's going to do a lot of work in Mayoni. Um, Seeds of Aggression, another that's more of a splashable card, I think, in lots of decks. But
I wonder. I
obviously
mean,
good here.
I didn't do this. So, question to you, question to Fred, because he's here. Were you looking at the lists that your opponent for the next week had used in previous weeks? I did not. I just.
I didn't do it in the Swiss rounds. I did in the top cut.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But
yeah.
I didn't in the Swiss rounds. I was too lazy. You probably should have though.
Probably should have. Yeah. If if you were playing to win and taking this seriously, and being in the spirit of it, tracking the cards of your opponents would have been a good idea. I definitely did not. So I'm curious to see whether under rug, because he was. I mean, it's like he was already tracking the data, so then he would be looking at it anyway. If he was
Right.
looking at whatever his opponent was, and it's like, oh, they've already used their Fester, so playing Snake is probably safe, or they already used Paladin, so I can play these
Right.
types of cards. I did not. I just was like, you know what, this seems like a fun deck. I'm just gonna play it because I don't know. My part of my opinion was that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think you would agree. You could easily build 9, 10 competitive decks out of the card pool right now.
9 or 10 might be stretching it, but
If
you can
Adventure
certainly
Party could
build
be
a lot.
done back in the day off of like like basically before time or definitely before Red Rains, I think you could easily put together at the very least 7 strong decks, no problem, and
I
then
mean,
the other
yeah,
three.
seven. I agree. Seven, I agree, can be done.
Because
Um,
I mean, you
and
could
you could
build
probably go
7.
more than that.
I mean, you could almost do very close to near 7 mono decks now that are fairly strong with, let's say, 1 to 2 dice splashing, like basically dual color decks. You did it
Yeah.
already, right?
Mhm.
And that was, you were also limiting yourself to master set at one point. I think you could build a
Yeah.
lot more than people give credit to the card pool for.
I mean, it's just you have to define competitive, right? Like if you can make an argument that it's a deck isn't super competitive because you're making a couple card concessions here and there, and you could optimize it a little bit more, but it's still a solid deck, right?
I mean,
Um,
yeah, if you're swapping out 2 cards, like there's a lot of decks where I think you could swap out 2 or 3 cards and it shifts it might shift the style of the deck, or it might shift um the 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 type of deck that you might be weak to, but it doesn't
yeah,
necessarily weaken the deck because there's still a lot of matchup dependencies in Ashes,
sure.
especially now, perhaps more so than ever. And so the quality of your deck is really only, 50%, and then the other 50 is matchup. And I'm ignoring player skill, um, but it's like,
Sure.
you gotta. That's why if you had done your research, I think you probably have a better success rate than if you just wing it like I did.
Yeah. I certainly do think though that this event did kind of show the depth of the card pool.
For sure, yeah.
Um, it is a lot deeper in the sense that you can build a lot of competitive decks at the same time than I maybe thought it was. Um, yeah, I guess to put that in perspective, the Rin deck that I played in the semifinals, I hadn't built until 2 days before the game, and I wasn't planning on playing a deck like that. I had that Mayoni built, right. I was looking at that deck
Right.
in the top, and I didn't like it, so I had to switch, and I had to go back and look at the cards I hadn't used, um, and was able to put that deck together. Now it's obviously it's not like I pulled that idea out of the air. I mean, Rin decks like that have been built before, um, but the fact that I was able to put six, well, all right, forget the Rhino deck, put five good decks together and still have all those cards available to make what I thought was a really solid win list
Yeah.
was that impressed me a lot. Like for the how deep the card pool was when I was able to put that together.
Fred makes an interesting point that the you might be getting along with your deck if you make some switches, but it becomes more matchup dependent. But also that because the decks weren't locked in, I'm assuming he means in advance or onwards, like that you're switching up your deck each week, that you could have the possibility of cheesy decks working better. Um, I I'm not sure if that's necessarily true as much as it still comes down to being matchup dependent, because if you play into something that, someone has the right removal for, right counter for, you're still you still have a problem. But
Yeah.
like he's talking about Voltron Sniper wouldn't survive a whole tournament, but it works for one game.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
mean,
the
yeah,
it's the thing with, like, Carl's Holy Knight Jessa deck that is great, or was great at that time, right into lots of different things. But could really suffer against something like a Realm Walker or a, I don't know, Guilt Link or whatever the answers to it are.
yeah.
Uh,
But like even some of those decks, I think it's really just going to come down to a lot of what the meta is and the matchups are. Because you could run one of those decks and just clean house if, like,
yeah, if you run
Turbo
into the
Mill.
right stuff, for
I
sure.
think we're past the time for Turbo Mill to like really take a whole tournament. But there was a point where I kept saying to you, you got to play it because I think it could, it has legs.
Yeah,
Um,
and I didn't do it.
and you didn't do it.
Um, no. I think I did it for a legendary one of those knockout things, like the first. I did play it at some point, but it was after,
Yeah,
like it was
yeah,
too late. Um, it did well though. I still think it has legs. Um,
yeah. It,
it's still a good.
I think it's just it's still perhaps more matchup dependent now, depending on like there's
Yeah.
always
Well they keep yeah they
oh
keep printing answers in every set for little guys, so
yeah.
it makes it harder and harder to do.
So this is so this is Apple's deck. This is a mill deck. I would call it a mill deck. It's got farewells and hollows and violinists. Um, and he went very heavy in the charm. Interesting that there was
Mhm.
no chimera charmer, no like that to me is interesting. There's no beast
Yeah.
tamer in here. Uh,
This is a deck he's been like iterating on.
it feels
Um,
it feels almost like something that we would have run or that we did run in one of those tournaments way back.
yeah. He just so he's on my team in the team tournament, and he just played this deck or something extremely close to it. I think he gave me the hollows because I needed him for Rimia, and he played something else in their plays. Um, but otherwise, it might have been the same list as this. And he's been like when we said, "All right, hey, what are we going to play for team tournament?" He was like, "I want to play Shimmerwing Saria." Because, like, so
Well, good.
this is something he's been working on for quite a while. I
Fred
think.
has been just typing up as fast as he possibly can. He was just talking to he first of all he says Turbo Mill isn't cheesy. It's not a one trick pony, and he still can't get over the fact that he only got second place with Ramia Prison Turbo Mill because he thought it was strong even before Paladin. Um, but I mean, there. Here's the thing: everything is a one trick pony or cheesy until it isn't. Until someone takes it like to the end, right? I had my iteration. I don't want to say it was like the first iteration, but like my idea started off that Turbo Mill could be a thing, and then you made it so much better. Carl, we had seen the holy knight or what's it called, the devoted holy knight type of decks, and then Carl takes it, just to that next level, and not just that, but it was a very specific meta pick, and potentially even you could consider it an opponent pick, right? He knew he was playing
Yeah.
Redentor, and it's like Redentor was all about playing Herald for months, so it was an opponent pick, and you have these
Right.
different, Final Destination. No one in the history of the last few years of Ashes would have ever said Mono Illusion would do anything. And then Lark was like, no, no, it can. And this is before we even had Red Rain's, illusion.
Yeah.
And he took it
Hmm.
and he did it. And then all of a sudden everyone started playing it. So I just think that there's we're such a small community, and Fred's talking about Ramia, right? Like playing a prison mill, that we haven't explored everything because we're always changing decks and we're always in these different formats of like this is competitive, this is casual, this is a limited format, this is a team format, like all these different things that are just fun. But very few people are running one deck 20, 30 times the way
Right.
people do in Lorcana or Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, and then iterating those
Yep.
decks, and then other people also playing that same deck and doing their very small iterations. Like if it's like one person
Mhm.
has a deck idea, everyone's like, okay, that's his thing. I'm gonna do my own thing. Whereas
Yep.
you have 1,000 people in the big four games, and they're like everyone is playing these three decks because they're gonna iterate it to perfection. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, there's just so
um,
much less data, right? Like
yeah,
there's so much less data and so much less incentive to win. you know, like you go to a Lorcana challenge and you can win, cards that are worth thousands of dollars.
yeah,
And so people are going to try really hard, and there's hundreds of thousands of players to play games every day. To this day I can still go on Pixelborn and I'll have a game of Lorcana in under a minute if I want one. Like
mm-hmm.
there's just that many people, so there's just so much more data, and we have 50 of us in here trying to break down 28 different Phoenixborn with between 7 different colors of mana or magic or whatever you want to call it. And compare that to a game like Lorcana, right? Lorcana has 6 colors and that's it. It doesn't have Phoenixborn as another variable.
Yeah,
you know?
and you
Um
can't just pick
and
anything.
yeah, and you can only play 2 colors together. This
Yeah,
game you can play all 7 colors together if you want, and you have to pick a Phoenixborn
mm-hmm.
that acts differently. So like there's just more dials to turn
Yeah,
in a game like Ashes. So even if there were a lot of players, I mean, I'm sure that a meta would fall out and get more well defined. But I mean, there's just a lot of variables in this game.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It makes it awesome.
Um, yeah, no, that yeah, just a different beast.
Mhm.
Quickly, I don't want to dive into every single deck deeply, but it's interesting that Apple Sith was playing a mill deck week two. This is Ninja's deck, which is a mill deck week two, like very charm heavy. Your deck was a mill deck, presumably you would call it that. I mean, it's fine. It's Final Destination
Yeah,
deck.
it's a different type of fatigue deck, but
Yeah,
yeah, it went
fatigue. Yeah.
heavily on spin down. Mhm.
So that's just interesting that all of a sudden week two I've pulled up a bunch of fatigue style decks, other than the snake, which was also like I'd almost call people like the first six decks that I pulled up, they're the archetype decks, the
Yeah.
typical ones that you might see elsewhere. And it's like, oh, okay. Um, Abby played. Ooh, this is an interesting split that you don't see too much. Very swarmy. Oh, it's all the double units, right? Um, Terra's wolf packs is very swarmy and very tempo-y. I like it. That's a cool deck. What did Waves played? Another dual deck. This was Hope Bats, and then Bill. He played a coal, an abundance coal deck, and he went with interesting one ofs, but one ofs cards that you probably don't really see elsewhere: the Railroad Recruit and Commander, and Reclaim Soul. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely some mix here. I'm gonna, just for the sake of it, I'm gonna go the opposite way. To be fair, so we're not just looking at the top six players' decks, because that's not fair. Let's look at the Fritzes, and Marsh Ninja. He's a newer player, I think.
Mhm.
I'm glad he joined. Anytime you get new players to join, it's always exciting.
Oh, absolutely. Look
Um,
at I randomly opened NB Fritz's deck up. We got Frozen Crown in this Rin deck. Red Flower. There's some spicy cards in here.
oh, one of
Majestic
the
Titan, Confusion Spores. Yeah.
which deck was this? Which one?
This is NB Fritz's week 2. It's a Rin bypass deck.
Oh, okay, I like that. If I'm just looking at, oh man, browser. Uh, on Oh, this deck was okay. I was like, why was this Underrug's deck? No, Marsh Ninja's deck Fallen Odette.
Oh wow.
15 ready spells. Is a very, very
Whew.
interesting. Went three ofs everything. Very, very different. Gilder,
Yeah.
Lightbringer, Cobra. I think that's a very pick your poison for that matchup type of thing. Interesting.
Well, this is a yeah. This is an. I mean, like you said, newer player, so we just have three of every card, right? Like this is going to be a lot of these cards. I mean, I'm not trying to hate on this deck, but there's not a lot of working together here. It looks like to me.
There's not a ton of synergy in
But
this one. Yeah.
yeah,
What? Oh, okay. Here's the NB Fritz's deck. Oh yeah, you could post a comment if you like this. You should say something. But Majestic Titan and then Foggy Bear.
yeah. You're gonna put the frozen crown on a Titan and then refresh it.
That is
Absolutely
that's the dream, isn't
spicy
it?
stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just punch for a ton and the confusion spores. I think Shmeny would like this deck.
Yeah, Confusion Spores did some work in my Rhino deck. That card overperformed
I don't know what deck that
in the
link.
test games I got to play it.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a
Let's
good card. It needs more tryouts.
see what Asterix ran because I'm always curious. He's got a very strong opinion on what is viable in the meta. Um, so
Koji
Wicked
Creeper,
Walt
it looks like.
ran your Turbo Mill.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he just
cool.
that's just a copy paste. I think I'm not sure if he changed anything, but very very cool. Um, oh, that was Fritz's deck.
Yeah, yeah.
Brian,
This is very. Yeah, it's an older version of it. Looks like back when I still played Anguish.
yeah. Oh, well, there's nothing
Um.
wrong with at least one Anguish. Asterix played
Oh,
a
there's only
Guilt
one
Link Creeper.
generosity, so he definitely changed some stuff. Yeah, he played a Koji Creeper deck, I think.
Ooh, and yeah, that's anytime I see Creeper, Wishing Wing, and Guilt Link, you know you're gonna have a tough time sequencing.
Yeah.
That's tough. Cool. All right, and then just anybody in particular you think might? Oh, let's see what Brian. I haven't picked a single deck from Brian. Let's see what he played in week 3, and let's also see what Shmeny played week 3.
Another Koji Creeper for Brian.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
was
Again, another deck that is archetypal,
yeah.
right? That you can put together and use some interesting cards. Maybe not. I want to say off the cuff because like Gilder and Guild Link are cards that you could put a lot of places. But they're also cards that don't need to be in other archetypes, right? Like Snake, I guess, can play Gilder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's
But if
you get these build around cards, right? Like Creeper, like Silver Snake, um, like Shadowhound. Kind of lends itself to Final Destination type decks because it's so heavy in illusion,
mm-hmm.
and you can build around these cards and out of the way of other decks.
Yeah,
I think
I,
that's where I've
I
seen a lot
definitely
of this
think
stuff.
there are certain patterns or synergies that are just natural to include, and then it's easy to
Right.
exclude from other decks. I thought I opened the wrong deck link because it says it's been shared by Killer Cactus. So I don't know if the link is wrong or if Shmeny actually just played your uh, your Final
Played
Destination
my
deck.
Hope deck.
Yeah, in week 3.
Possible. I don't know.
I think you
Yeah,
probably did.
he might have.
Fred said the Fritzes have so much creativity. I agree.
They do.
Yeah, there's the first few times I ever seen EB Fritz I think play, and he was like iterating on Koji Swarm in so many ways, and I was like, this is wild. These are so strong and powerful, and it's really cool to see what he had done. Let's open up No Such and Redentor and Maddie's week 4 list as a quick spotlight.
No such on another heavy charm type deck with another Saria Shimmerwing deck, actually.
But this one's got Snakebite, which is interesting.
Yeah,
You don't
I
see
like
that
Snakebite. That's a good card.
enough, I think.
Red King has been playing Snakebite lately in a couple of his illusion heavy decks, and it's been pretty well done. Here's
Does
the
he first
standard
five it,
Redentor
or
Herald.
does he bring it in later?
I think he plays it later.
Hmm. Yeah, this is very
The looking
standard.
Herald deck.
Uh,
Yeah.
this just looks like a really good deck.
Yeah, this is a deck from like 3 metas ago, but
Yeah,
it's really good. It looks really solid.
I wonder if this is the like if this was one he was because this is now week 4 decks I'm pulling. So if he was on the cusp and that's why he was picking like just something super solid.
Mhm.
And then
And then
Maddie
it's like,
was
yeah,
puppet
just
burn.
Jessa Puppets. Again, another archetype, right?
Yeah,
Um
that's
we
interesting.
we saw quite a few Jessa Puppets.
We've seen a lot of archetype decks,
Yeah. I think it makes
which
sense.
makes sense, I think, because you know
Mhm.
for sure which cards overlap and which don't. So there are definitely ones that you can just pick. Like I'm gonna build Snake, which is completely divorced from a mill deck, unless you're
Right.
playing the mill deck that I created, which is a Snake mill deck with what's that one? Weeping Spirit.
Yeah,
Um,
I still think that's an awesome place for Weeping Spirit.
and then
I
another
opened up Carl's
Koji.
deck,
Shadow played another typical
a
Koji
Koji.
deck and
Hmm?
a demon. Sorry, James False Demon Stag deck. This I know is inspired by Inquisitor, and it's a very fast swarmy deck. So very cool.
I went to
And
week 5 and looked at Carl because we haven't looked at Carl's decks yet, really. And there's another Shimmerwing Saria in
okay, well,
in week 5 for Carl.
let's see what Carl played. I know he played Lulu at one point, and week one actually was where I saw 3 Rowans, and Carl was one of them. So that was
Okay.
another interesting pick. He played his EE to GG deck that I forget who he
Yeah.
won with a year ago, but very solid deck. I cannot win with Rowan, but I know that this
A
is a
crow.
solid deck.
Yeah, I can't win with Rowan either. He played a Crow Det in week 3, it looks like.
Oof, this is the Paladin Raven book. Like, love the title. If you are less than 3, you might as well just flee.
Yeah.
Yeah, hate this deck. I've faced it before. Let's see what Fred picked in his final week.
Yeah, we haven't looked at his stuff yet. Snake.
Yep,
Yep.
very.
Mayonnaise
This is
Snake.
like
Change,
very typical.
Change Psyche is here. That's interesting.
I guess yeah, that's the one spice. Other than, I mean, I've seen refresh the card
Yeah.
before in a snake deck.
Yeah, change Psyche is just a better refresh unless they're finding ways to pile tokens on your snake.
Is it a better
Flashing
refresh?
tempers.
No, isn't refresh better?
Well, I mean, if you have one exhaustion token only,
Yeah, yeah.
then you always want change Psyche because you could use it to exhaust something else instead of doing it. But if they blood change your guy or something, then you want the refresh.
Uh, let's pick Vitreous and Dell. Let's see what Dell. Hopefully, he actually kept some of his decks because so far I've opened a bunch of his links and they're all dead.
Vitreous is on another Mayone snake, and he's got 6. He's a Weeping Spirit snake.
Oh no, this I
There's
opened
your
up
deck.
his week 3 deck and it was an Auric deck, which I haven't seen.
Okay.
I haven't seen an Auric in a while. Um, this is a Squall Stallion, Shadow Spirit, Abundance, Ancestor Spirit deck.
Wow,
That's very different.
that's cool.
So,
Hmm.
I mean, they're definitely um And then Dell Elementary played a Bats Burn Jessa deck. Oh, which is actually, I guess it's the Adventuring Party deck. I didn't pay attention to the title. So that's another way you could have approached it. And I think actually,
Yeah.
if you if you were a new player and you wanted to join this format, I think that would have been a perfectly viable approach. Is to
Sure.
just play any of the pre-built sets from any community member, and you know that
Yeah,
they've
I mean, the only issue is that a lot of those are outdated, right? Like they were before the last couple Red Rain sets, but
you could, I mean, I
um
think they still like most of them by and large, because of their synergy, still have legs, and it's really more about piloting anyway, and the matchup. But you could do some
yeah.
small swaps, right? They're just natural, like this card is better than another, but they're all so different that I think you wouldn't have too much of a hard time.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, apparently
So
Fred lost. He said his tempo was not fast enough. I couldn't break through. Crypt Guardian was difficult to play around. There you go. See, Crypt Guardian. People need to play
it's a
that
good
more.
card.
Maybe I'll build it
It's a good
for
card.
the team tourney.
No.
No one's watching this anyway, so they won't know when it hits.
They won't know it's coming.
Yeah. So
Oh,
we got the team tourney on. We should, I don't know, do coverage at some point. I guess maybe the finals, the semis. Is there
yeah,
a
I
top
think
cut?
so.
Yeah.
I think there is. Kyle and I are on the same team for this, so we won't be playing each other and streaming games time. But um, we'll have to see if we play some Ashes this weekend. I know we'll both be at that Lorcana set champs, so sometimes we bring our Ashes cards and get a game in before.
Yeah.
See if we
Or
can do that. But
get Luke to enter number two,
yeah,
hype up some of the matches.
absolutely, he loves to do that. Be all in.
This I hope, of all the things, like we have a lot of community members that put in a lot of hard work running things, because it is a lot of work to run a tournament. Um, and this is one I hope sticks around as a staple. I mean, we have a few staples now, which are either seasonal or yearly, and this is one that I hope makes a comeback.
Yeah, I agree. This was a fun one, and we get a couple more sets in, and we already have one more set than we had when we did this tournament. Maybe after the Red Rain's time or sympathy set comes out,
Mm-hmm.
and there'll be enough new cards into the pool where you can do this again, and we shake up the archetypes a little bit because I do think that it's gonna get like these archetypal decks when you run something like this, but again, that just kind of shows how deep the card pool really is.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
And that's we've already said that, but that's what I learned the most about this tournament and liked the most about it is it forced you to go deep into your bag of tricks. And when you tried to do that, you realize that the bag of tricks for Ashes is really deep, and there's just a lot of cool stuff you can do. Especially when some of the top meta stuff is not necessarily available to just eat up your idea.
yeah. I mean, there of all. I mean, there are certain colors that lend themselves more to archetypes, and I am curious to see when we eventually get to time if that pushes any of those archetype, like the sort of the token or hopper, wishing wing, those things, if it pushes those further or if it creates something new, because that's really one of the, I mean, illusion has played with the tempo and played with um the reactions, which is always good.
Yeah.
Sympathy, I think, is, I'm just curious to see what it is, because it's that color that binds all, but it doesn't necessarily have a full identity of its own archetype wise. Like we haven't seen
Mhm.
mono sympathy as much in the wild. So I'm interested to
Right.
see where that goes. and then how it
Well,
affects,
sympathy likes to draw cards, so it will
and
be
use them as resources.
right. So it'll be. And I'm interested to see um, if it. My guess is that it will play with that to some degree. I don't know. I've actually seen the cards. I don't remember them, so I don't know
Yeah,
what they do.
right.
But I'm hoping that they play with that a bit.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and um, I had something to say, and I don't remember. It is getting late.
yeah, unfortunately it's 10:30 here, and I'm ready to go to bed because I'm old.
Yeah,
So
we're all getting
it's
old.
about that time. Yeah.
Fred's at wondering. He's like, oh, maybe more hand filtering. Uh, that's another option.
Tell you
Um,
what, I've been playing Changing Winds in Rimia lately.
oh yeah,
Um, as a yeah, because she can actually play it because she can play Ancestral Army and still get a bunch of guys on the board.
right.
And that's like kind of the ultimate hand filtering card, and it's good. Like I've really enjoyed it. Been liking drawing 7 or 8 cards in round one and focusing my hound books really fast. That's super fun.
Um,
But you figure Changing Winds draw is a draw 3 in round one, and it's
is
pretty
it
cool.
is it draw three?
Well, you draw two when you play it. You draw two and put two back,
Okay, yeah,
but you can use Remia's ability to get 2 extra cards right off the bat. So it's you don't have to put your first 5 cards back when you do that,
just see
and
your
then
whole
you can
deck.
right then you can. I mean, seriously, I've seen half my deck by the time round one's over. So you almost always get a hound focus.
That's very cool.
Pretty cool. Anyway, off topic, but
Yeah.
hand
So
filtering's fun. That's where I was trying to go.
yeah, yeah. We need Clue to jump back in, play. So
Yeah,
he's
Clue's
been,
been gone for a while. We need to get him back.
yeah, with uh with all these new tools. He's the type of guy who
Yeah,
was like,
absolutely.
remember when he did the 15 iterations of um
Hmm.
of one type? What was it?
Realm of the absurd.
Realm of the Absurd. That's
The
right.
Realm Walker.
And
Yeah,
then he had like step by step breakdown of exactly how to sequence round one and everything. That's the type of
yeah,
testing we need. Um,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
we need that internal fortitude to do that stuff that we're too lazy to do.
yeah, and we need a tournament
Come back,
that
Clue.
can bring Flora back as well.
She's at least been around talking,
Yeah, but
but
actually get in the
Clue's just been
games.
gone.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So anyway, and hopefully AshCon, that would be fun too.
that would be awesome.
It's been a while.
It would be.
All right. I have said our sign up too many times in the last week. So if you can remember them all, since you created at least half of them, say
We have to say all of them.
yeah.
All right.
I don't even remember them. Go for it.
I don't know. I don't know if I remember either. All right. If you're not janky, you're stanky, everyone. Frog up, wolf down, snake out, goat back, lion on, horse around, turtle power.
Easy.
Have a good night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Easy
Ciao.
game.
Ciao, Fred.
Yeah.